Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that nothing looks broken, but everything feels slightly wrong. Your salary is the same, your country looks stable, the markets are open, and the news says things are under control, but your grocery bill is higher, your savings buy less, and every answer from the people in charge sounds like an excuse. That quiet discomfort is often what the end of a superpower really feels like. It is not usually cities on fire or flags falling overnight. It is the slow, hidden decay of a financial system that still pretends everything is fine. In this video, I want you to see what is really happening underneath that surface. We are going to look at how empires actually end through money, not just through wars and headlines. We will walk through 5 financial signals that show up again and again before a superpower loses its position. We will use 3 big examples: Spain, when silver ruled the world; Britain, when the pound was king; and America today. By the end, I want you to be able to look at any headline and quietly ask yourself one question. Not, will the empire fall? But which stage are we in right now? You are watching Wealth Grid Hub, where we connect money, history, and power in a way that actually makes sense. Before we go deeper, do one quick thing for me. If you care about real explanations instead of hype and panic, hit the like button right now. And make sure you subscribe to Wealth Grid Hub so you do not miss these long-form breakdowns. It tells the algorithm that you want serious content about money and empires, not just short-term noise. All right, let's start with the first signal almost every empire ignores until it is too late. The first signal is simple to describe and hard to fix. It is the moment when the cost of past promises becomes heavier than what the real economy can support. In plain English, it is when interest, pensions, wars, and bailouts start eating the future. Governments promise everything to everyone, and the bill arrives years later. Go back to Spain in the 1500s and 1600s. Spain thought it had discovered infinite wealth in the New World. Ships were coming back filled with silver from the Americas. To European bankers, the Spanish crown looked like the safest borrower on earth. Spain borrowed heavily, promising to pay debts with future silver shipments. On paper, Spain was unbelievably rich. In reality, it was mortgaging its future to finance the present. The silver that poured into Europe did not just make Spain powerful. It also created inflation and made everyday life more expensive. Instead of building a diverse, productive economy, Spain became addicted to silver. It used that flow of metal to fund long wars, pay mercenaries, and maintain a huge imperial machine. Year after year, the empire promised more than its tax base could support. Eventually, the interest alone became suffocating. Spain defaulted on its debts multiple times. Each time, it tried to reset the game without changing its behavior. That is what it looks like. Now look at Britain. For a long time, the British Empire controlled global trade routes, colonies, and sea power. The pound sterling was the backbone of world finance. But power came with a price. Britain fought massive wars, especially World War I and World War II. To pay for them, it borrowed on a scale that would have been unthinkable a century earlier. After the wars, Britain faced reconstruction costs, social demands at home, and a shrinking empire abroad. The debt was huge, and the interest burden was heavy. Britain had to choose between the image of empire and the reality of its balance sheet. Over time, it accepted that the center of financial gravity had moved toward the United States. Here is the pattern. First, the empire promises. Then it borrows to keep those promises. Then the interest grows faster than the real economy. At some point, the math simply stops working. That is signal number 1. Now bring this forward to the United States. The numbers are bigger, the institutions are more advanced, and the marketing is much better. But the basic tension is similar. When interest payments on government debt start competing with defense, healthcare, and social programs, something has to give. When investors quietly ask, how does this ever get paid back except through inflation or rule changes? That is the first signal flashing. It does not mean the empire ends tomorrow morning. It means the future has already been sold, and the only question is who pays the real cost. The second financial signal shows up in the empire's currency. And when a superpower is healthy, the rest of the world wants its money. Other countries trade in it, borrow in it, and save in it. Holding that currency feels safe. It is a symbol of trust in the empire's power and stability. But as the underlying finances weaken and political decisions become more unpredictable, something subtle starts to happen. Partners stop wanting to hold as much of that currency. They still use it, but they quietly look for alternatives. They sign trade deals in other currencies. They shift a portion of their reserves elsewhere. They do not shout about it on television. They simply hedge their bets. Spain's currency power eroded as inflation and serial defaults undermined confidence. The same silver that once represented strength became a source of instability. As other European powers built stronger financial systems and broader industries, Spain's money lost its special status. Britain lived a similar story in the 20th century. After 2 world wars, the pound sterling was no longer unquestioned. The United States had the industrial base, the gold, and the momentum. More trade was settled in dollars. More reserves were held in dollars, and Now, the pound went from the world's anchor to just another major currency. A key humiliation came when Britain had to turn to the International Monetary Fund for help. That was the market saying, "We do not trust you the way we used to." For the United States, the script will not be identical, but it will rhyme. You will not necessarily see a headline that says "dollar is dead." Instead, you will see more energy deals priced in other currencies. You will see regional blocs settling trade in local units or baskets of currencies. You will see central banks quietly increasing their gold holdings or diversifying reserves away from pure dollars. Each of those steps is a small vote that says, we still use the dollar, but we no longer depend on it alone. That is signal number 2. The third signal shows up at home in the rules around money. When empires feel pressure, they start controlling how money can move. They present it as stability, safety, and patriotism. But underneath, it is about buying time. Spain tried to control the flow of silver to manage its problems. Britain, after World War II, imposed strict capital controls. Ordinary citizens were limited in how much they could move abroad or invest overseas. The message was always the same: these restrictions are temporary. Once things normalize, we will relax them. But temporary tools have a habit of becoming permanent. Financial repression is a technical phrase that hides a harsh truth. It means savers earn less than the real rate of inflation. It means your bank balance looks stable, but your purchasing power is quietly shrinking. It is a slow, silent tax on anyone who tries to play by the rules. In post-war Britain, this looked like low interest rates, rationing, and a very managed financial system. People still lived their lives, but the space to act freely with money was smaller than they thought. In a modern system like America's, financial repression can be more subtle. It might appear as complex regulations that push pensions and savings into government bonds, no matter the real return. It might appear as endless narratives about what is safe and responsible, even when those choices are clearly losing ground to inflation. You might see more talk about closing loopholes, cracking down on speculation, or protecting the system. Some of that may be justified, but when you combine aggressive debt levels with tighter money controls, you're often looking at an empire trying to stretch the clock. That is signal number 3. The fourth signal is emotional as much as financial. It is the rise of massive asset bubbles and extreme inequality at the same time. Before an empire loses its status, its most connected insiders often enjoy a kind of final party. In Spain, elites benefited from silver wealth and imperial connections, while ordinary people suffered under inflation and taxes. In Britain, there were long periods where financial markets, colonial profits, and elite lifestyles looked strong, even as the underlying system weakened. From the outside, it still looked like success. From the inside, the gap between the top and everyone else kept growing. In the United States, this pattern is very visible. You have decades of rising stock markets, tech booms, real estate surges, and speculative manias. At the same time, many people feel like they are running faster just to stand still. Asset owners watch their portfolios explode in value. Non-owners feel permanently locked out. When interest rates are pushed down for years, people are pushed into riskier and riskier assets to try to keep up. That is what late-stage easy money looks like. Bubbles are not just random accidents. They are the outcome of a system that cannot face its underlying problems. Instead of fixing those problems, it pumps more credit into the system. It tells itself, as long as assets go up, people will feel good. But eventually, the gap between price and reality becomes too big. When that gap closes, the pain lands mostly on ordinary people, not on the architects of the system. As inequality widens, social trust begins to crack, people stop believing the game is fair. Some withdraw completely, others become angry and look for someone to blame. Politics becomes more extreme and more emotional. Short-term promises replace long-term planning. That social fracture is a sign that the financial model has turned against its own population. That is signal number 4. The fifth and final signal is where everything converges. It is the point where military ambition, social promises, and the tax base can no longer be balanced. Every empire believes it has a special role in the world. Spain saw itself as the defender of a faith and a civilization. Britain saw itself as the guardian of trade routes and global order. America sees itself as the defender of democracy and a certain model of globalization. These roles are not free. They require ships, bases, weapons, logistics, and alliances. They also require domestic spending to keep citizens supportive or at least quiet. In the early stages, the world is happy to finance that mission. It buys the empire's bonds and holds its currency because it trusts the long-term story. But as debt grows, currencies weaken, controls tighten, and bubbles inflate, the cost of empire becomes harder to hide. Citizens start to ask hard questions. Why is there always money for foreign wars, but never enough for basic services at home? Why do banks get rescued instantly while households are told to tighten their belts? Allies begin to hedge, wondering if the empire can actually keep its security promises. Rivals test the edges, looking for weakness. Spain's overreach on the battlefield, combined with its financial weakness, opened the door for other powers to rise. Britain's global commitments became unsustainable as its economy shrank relative to its ambitions. It had to gradually give up colonies, close bases, and accept a smaller role. The United States faces its own version of this dilemma. It must decide how to fund a huge defense system, an aging population, rising healthcare costs, and a deeply divided political environment. When an empire can no longer realistically fund all three pillars, military reach, social stability, and debt service, without extreme measures, the fifth signal is here. So how do empires actually end? Most people imagine a single dramatic event, a crash, a war, a revolution. But history paints a different picture. Empires end through overlapping financial signals that build for years, sometimes decades. The debt burden outgrows the real economy. The currency slowly loses its special status. The system turns inward and controls its own citizens more tightly. Asset bubbles and inequality pull society apart. The cost of global leadership no longer matches what the underlying economy can support. By the time a visible crisis arrives, the story has already been written. No country is magically exempt from these patterns. Not Spain, not Britain, not America. The point of this video is not to celebrate or predict collapse on a specific date. The point is to understand the mechanics. On Wealth Grid Hub, we do not deal in easy answers or simple slogans. We look at incentives, math, and history, and we ask what they are quietly telling us. If you are still watching right now, you are already different from the average viewer. Most people clicked away after the first 30 seconds. You stayed because you want frameworks, not just headlines. So let me ask you a question. Which of the 5 signals do you think is flashing the brightest today? Is it the debt burden and interest costs? Is it the slow shift away from a single dominant currency? Is it the quiet financial repression and shrinking real returns for savers? Is it the massive bubbles and rising inequality? Or is it the gap between global ambitions and what the economy can truly support? Tell me in the comments which signal worries you the most and why, and tell me which historical example hit you the hardest. Was it Spain's addiction to silver, Britain's post-war decline, or the way you see some of these patterns echoing in America right now? Your comments are not just engagement. They help shape future videos and help build a community that actually thinks. If there is someone in your life who keeps saying a superpower can never really fall, share this video with them. Send it to a friend who loves history. Send it to a family member who is worried about the future but cannot connect the dots. The more people understand these signals, the less shocked they will be when the world shifts again. Thank you for spending your time with Wealth Grid Hub. If you have not already, make sure you are subscribed and that notifications are turned on. We have more deep dives coming on money, power, and the patterns that keep repeating through history. Stay curious, stay calm, and I will see you in the next video.